So hand over to you, Ray.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I've got some important information now, some important business before we start. I've got a question and a statement. The first question is, how cold is it? That's the first question. And the second statement is, I've got my feet in an electric foot warmer at the moment under my desk to keep me warm.
Oh.
So now that the important business is out of the way, let's get down to the real business. Okay, just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, please use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand electronically or wave madly at the screen. I think, Laurie, you're going to monitor she'll be monitoring you, so if she sees you going madly waving your hand, she'll bring it to my attention. Of course, I'm not sure if you know, but you can only see so many people on one screen. So use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen, and when you finish the question, put your hand down with that facility. If I happen to say at any time manager or operator, those words are sort of interchanged in today's presentation. Because if I'm talking about the manager, I'm really meaning the operator. If I'm saying the operator, I'm really meaning the manager. They're just different people with the sort of the same role. Okay, so the two topics, bylaws, and the other one is residents requesting capital improvement to communal facilities. Bit of a mouthful. So we're going to do bylaws first, okay? I see Glenys there from Brooklands. Hello, Glenys. I know you're probably having problems with your bylaws in your village. I'll ask you a question about it later on. We'll be using you as a what do you call it? What do you call that when you use someone as an example? A case study, basically. We use your village as a case study. And I think of Carlisle Gardens. Is Carlisle Gardens from Bundaberg or Townsville or someone there today? We'll use them as a case study too. Anyway, we'll talk about them anyway. Okay, so bylaws. In the Retirement Village Act, Section 130, it prescribes that residents may, by special resolution and with the agreement of the scheme operator, make, change or revoke bylaws. Now, when we're talking about bylaws, these bylaws in particular, these are the bylaws that are made by residents in retirement villages. They're completely distinct from bylaws you might have heard of in community title schemes or in freehold villages, okay? They're different, and we're going to talk about that down the track as we go through this section, okay? What I'm going to do first is read out the provision in the Act that talks about bylaws, and then we'll do some general comments, and then I'm going to talk about each subsection one at a time and explain it, okay? So, Section 130 of the Retirement Village Act. And it says, the residents of a retirement village may, by special resolution at a residents' meeting and with the agreement of the scheme operator, make, change or revoke bylaws for the village. Then it goes on to say the scheme operator's agreement must not be unreasonably withheld. A bylaw made about the non-exclusive use, a bylaw may be made about the non-exclusive use and enjoyment of the village. If there is an inconsistency between a bylaw and a provision of a residence contract for the village, the provision prevails to the extent of the inconsistency. And lastly, subsection 3, where it talks about a bylaw being made about the non-exclusive use and enjoyment of the village. So subsection 3 does not limit the resident's power under another law to make, change or revoke bylaws. Now, put your hands up if you think that was a lot of gobbledygook. Who thinks that was a lot of gobbledygook? There. Don't be honest. Be honest. Oh, Jody, you're there. You're finally there. Hello, Jody. You made it. Are you in your pajamas? You can't.
I can't even see.
Okay. Righto. Okay. Now.
Cheeky.
General comments about bylaws. In other words, you could generally describe bylaws made by residents. They're rules made by residents for residents. But I don't like to use the word rules because that's used for another thing we're going to talk about soon. Well, going to talk about it now, actually. So if you use the word rules, they're the things that we should describe, well, the rules that the scheme operator gives to you either in your handbook or under your contract. And we all got plenty of them, haven't we? We all got plenty of conditions in your contract. They're basically rules. And then also too, the things, the day-to-day rules that the operator or the manager might put out to all residents from the office. They are not bylaws. They should be described as rules. So there should be a clear distinction in the naming of things.
Can I just say something? Sorry, Ray. Can I just say that as residents, we can't change the rules, can we?
No. Rules are made by the operator, made by the manager, and they belong to the operator. And we just got to abide by them. We can influence them, we can discuss them, but we don't have any power or authority to change the rules. You happy with that then, for that explanation, Judy? Yeah. Yep. So, for example, there's plenty in our village. I mean, don't park on the grass. I don't know, what else is there, Judy? Can't wash your car. Can't wash your car on the road. I don't know. There's lots of...
Yeah, the caravan, if you're unpacking the caravan, you can only have it outside your house for so many...
48 hours you have your caravan. Those things are made by the operator, okay? And when they're made by the operator, they're not in concrete, but they can be influenced by the residents, but they're not bylaws. They're the rules. They're either in your contract or they're in your handbook or distributed or some way by the office. Okay? Is everybody clear on what rules are? Pamela Frank looks confused. You're right, Pamela? Okay. So no matter so when something's written about bylaws or rules, the words shouldn't be interchanged. And I know that Brooklands is having a bit of trouble with their operator and bylaws and rules. Okay. So in a nutshell, rules are made by the operator, bylaws are made by residents. That's it. That's the distinction. Okay. And they shouldn't be interchanged. So I'm going to talk about each subsection now. Well, actually, no, another general comment. Before residents somehow decide to start making bylaws or passing resolutions, there should be some sort of discussions with the operator or the manager about the proposed bylaw to get their agreement in principle before the actual bylaws agreed to by residents by special resolution, because you don't want to go down the business of organising all these arguments about the bylaw and then the discussions and then the final motion and then running a special resolution vote to find that the operator is going to have trouble with the bylaw. So before you start to get down that path, there should be some sort of early discussions with the bylaw and get their agreement in principle before you do that. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're good. Having said that, though, our village doesn't have any bylaws. Hey, Judy, in our village, we got no bylaws whatsoever. We've never made any. Yeah. Because there's adequate rules to cover all the scenarios. We've got a comprehensive handbook. There's no bylaws to be made. But I know in other villages, one of the Carlisle Gardens, they have various contracts. And some of the earlier contracts don't include some of the things that are in the later contracts to do with the behaviour, not quite the behaviour, but the performance of people within the village. So they're going down the path of passing a whole lot of bylaws for their residents because they don't have the things in some of the earlier contracts. So those things are required. Another general comment, even though it's change or revoke the bylaws by that's a resolution, there's nothing to prevent a scheme operator from suggesting, that's about all they can do, to residents if they want to make a bylaw about a particular topic. They can just bring it up, but residents don't pass it, they don't pass it, end of story. So they can make a proposal to residents. Okay. Now we've talked about subsection 1 and 2 about the resolution and the agreement, which is subsection 1 and 2 of the scheme operator, their agreement to the bylaw. So those things are covered. So subsection 3 talks about a bylaw may be made about the non-exclusive use and enjoyment of the village. And you might say, what does that mean? Well, it means you can only make a bylaw about those things that are in the common realm. Okay. For example, you could make a bylaw about preventing smoking in the communal areas, like the outside communal areas of the village, and put a stop to that. But you couldn't make a bylaw about a person smoking on their balcony. Okay, because that's not a non-exclusive use. Having said that, though, if the smoking still disrupts other people, disrupts other residents in their home, that's the subject of a completely different process. It's not a bylaw. Okay, it'll be a section 135 and a 136 discussion with the manager, but it can't be the subject of a bylaw, a person smoking on their balcony. But in the communal area, yes. Another bylaw that might be made, this is sort of one that's relevant to our village, even though we never made it as a bylaw, that you could make a bylaw to say that the communal pool can be used only at certain times, or kiddies can't use the pool before a certain time, to give people that want to exercise in the pool adequate time to do laps and stuff like that. So you can make a bylaw about the pool. So there's some ideas. Does anybody got any questions so far about bylaws? No, none at all. You there, Laurie? You watching everybody? No, no one got a question.
I'll ask a question.
Okay, good day, Judy.
Can the operator just absolutely say no? That bylaw is not acceptable in this village.
Okay, so the Act says the scheme operator's agreement must not be unreasonably withheld. You might ask what that means. That's the reasonable person test. If there's no adequate reason, I mean, they'd have to have a good reason to do it. And if they did prevent it, and residents really wanted this bylaw, that'd be the subject of probably the QCAT dispute, or at least, you know, going down that dispute resolution process. But if I wouldn't think that if residents want to put in place a rule, so to speak, a residence rule, that that unreasonably withhold their agreement. Okay.
Could I just say that one of the things that residents can't do, this is a very topical subject at the moment, you can't pass a rule that
bylaw.
A bylaw, sorry, you can't pass a bylaw about who can live in the village.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's completely out of that.
That's not yours to make. That's not your decision to make, and it's not your decision to say that somebody has to leave the village either.
No.
So you haven't got any control, and you cannot make bylaws about another resident or who lives in your village, who should be leaving the village. All of those things that I know of, some residents are getting frustrated with at the moment in their village. That is way out of your control.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you can only make a bylaw about the non-exclusive use areas. In other words, the communal areas. Okay, or the communal use and enjoyment of those areas. Another thing that I want to say is if there's an inconsistency between a bylaw made by the residents and what's in a resident's contract, obviously the provision in the contract prevails. A classic example is, I think there's a village up north, one of the Carlisle Garden ones, wanted to make a bylaw about no dogs, okay? Which is not an unreasonable thing for their village because they've got no fences. It makes actually perfect sense. It's a good idea. But people's contracts say they can have a dog if they're consented to by the operator. So there's a what do you call it? A disagreement between the contract and the bylaw. So yeah. Okay. So I wouldn't think you could make one of those if the contract says otherwise. If the contract said something different than allowing pets, well then you could make a bylaw about that.
I'd also think that you've got to be very careful about some of those bylaws because you could hit the Anti-Discrimination Act and get caught up with the Human Rights Commissioner if somebody decides to challenge residents about a bylaw that they're making.
Yeah, to do with pets anyway.
I mean, I'm thinking about dogs.
Yeah, well, they've changed the rules for body corporates and things like that to do with pets and dogs and things. Yeah. So, yeah. But having that though, the village doesn't have any fences whatsoever. So how could you possibly have a pet or dog anyway. Yeah. I see that Liz Goodfellow had a hand up, sort of. Did you have your hand up, Liz? Did you want to ask a question? No? Okay.
Oh, somebody does.
Who's that?
Barry, I can see.
Okay, hit me with it, Barry. Where are you, Barry?
Ray, my question is that the residents, with the scheme operator's consent, make the bylaws.
Yeah.
Therefore, I see that the scheme operator is responsible to enforce the bylaws.
We're getting to that, Barry. We're getting to that.
So they're responsible for ensuring that the bylaws are complied with, right? Now, what happens?
I don't know whether I agree with that myself, but anyway.
What happens if you've got bylaws and the scheme operator isn't making any effort to enforce them or to see that they're complied with?
Okay, can we have that question at the end? I got that as my last thing. I got a big note here at the end of my thing. There's no enforcement provisions whatsoever in the Act. Can I come back to your question, Barry? When we finish, I've got one more comment, and then we'll go to that question. How's that?
Fine.
Okay, right. So the last general comment that I got to talk about is if you live in a freehold village. Anybody here in freehold villages? Hands up, freehold villages. Okay, a couple of freehold villages. The bylaws under Section 130 are those bylaws under the Retirement Villages Act about the non-exclusive use areas of the village. Okay, whereas under the Body Corporate and Community Management Act, bylaws can be made under that also, and they're completely different bylaws. They're They're made by the Body Corporate, and then I suppose the Body Corporate's got to try to enforce them. Good luck with that. I don't know whether there's any enforcement provisions in their act, but they're different. They're different bylaws, completely separate. Okay, the ones in the Retirement Village Act about the non-exclusive use, and the ones about the Body Corporate stuff are completely separate. Okay.
Yeah, Barry had a question about enforcement of bylaws.
Oh yeah, you had the question about the enforcement of bylaws. Well, the one of my comments here is there's absolutely no enforcement provisions in Section 130 about bylaws. So how it's enforced, I'm not going to comment. I've got no idea. Don't know. One would expect that
I don't know if the operator didn't make the bylaws.
Didn't make them. They just agreed to it. So
that's
what I mean. To me, a bylaw is like a waste of time. In my personal opinion, a bylaw is like, what's the point?
A bylaw has to be agreed by everyone, and everyone.
Only a special resolution.
Oh, through a special resolution. So if somebody is not going to, it's like
any rule.
Yeah, like any rule. If somebody doesn't abide by it, then there's nothing that you can do to make them abide by it.
Yeah.
It's not the operator's responsibility, because the residents have made it and the residents have voted on it.
Yeah, and even rules made by operators, how much effort do they make to have those rules enforced? Practically none. So bylaws aren't much different to rules made by the operators, are they, Judy? I mean, we got people in that village that the man just refuses to walk his dog on a lead. He just walks it everywhere off a lead. And he just refuses. And that's not a bylaw, that's a rule by the operator, and it's actually in our contract. But he refuses. So where does that go? So, Barry, there's no answer, mate. You with me, Barry?
No, Barry seems to have disappeared.
He's gone back to sleep in his recliner. So, yeah, my comment was there's no enforcement provision in the Act, and how it could be enforced is I've got no idea, if at all. And residents don't have...
Yeah, no, they couldn't. Under the rule, I suppose the operator could take the resident to QCAT.
If it's worth the effort.
If it's worth the effort. So, but the operator certainly wouldn't take a resident to QCAT under a bylaw.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, the bylaws surely they wouldn't be that important. I mean, they're just basic things. Okay. I know that village that wanted to have the bylaw about no dogs, they also wanted to have no fires in people's backyards and stuff like that, which is like, wouldn't that be a rule?
I don't think you can't control what people do in their own space.
Because that's not a non-exclusive use area, is it?
Yeah, that's right. It's personal use. So
it should have been. I mean, the operator should enforce rules about fires, not bloody residents, anyway. Oh, if there is, this is the last comment I want to make about bylaws. If there is a decision made to make a bylaw or amend it or revoke one at any time by residents under a special resolution, which we covered in our first webinar, special resolutions, it should be recorded in the Register of Important Decisions maintained by the Residents Committee. So that way there's not any issue like there is in Brooklands. Hey, Glenys, there's no issue in Brooklands where the operator has taken these rules that were published some years ago under a previous operator and made them into bylaws by misnaming them. And to the best of my knowledge, the last I heard, that they're not actually bylaws, they're actually rules made by the operator and presented to residents, but they were misnamed bylaws, and now the operator insists that they're bylaws without any further discussion, and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So if there's any bylaws made or changed or revoked, they need to be put in the residents' Register of Important Decisions, so there can be a record so people can look back and see what happened. So if you haven't got a Register of Important Decisions, even if there's nothing in it, I suggest that every village goes and makes one and has it somewhere so the secretary of the committee knows where it is and things can be added to it. And if there's nothing in it, it's good. Still have it with nothing in it, and people know that nothing was made. How's that? Any further questions about bylaws? No? We're good? So, Glenys, have you had any joy?
Yeah.
Good.
A couple of the residents got together and put a small group together to put bylaws together.
Oh, okay. We won't go down that path then.
No, we have a meeting this afternoon of the resident committee, and I'll be passing on what comes out of today, but I have gone over and over and over the Act and all the details. I've explained it. We still have some people on the committee that don't get it. Our operator has used those previous bylaws in the other villages that they now own. So that just says to me very clearly that those bylaws were never made by residents because they've gone from one village to another village. So residents have had no say in what they are. But the governance people in Reside, our operators, won't even discuss it. So I feel now with our small group that have put some ideas together for bylaws, they all match up with actually the operator's rules. So I'm going to put today that we write to the operator, discuss about the rules, and see if they can do something about the rules that they've set that are part of their contracts. The new people coming in are part of their contracts. They can enforce some of those rules, which will mean perhaps it will settle all the bylaw issue at Brookland.
Yeah,
I'll
because they just
misname
them. All they did was just misname them. They just thought they just misnamed them, and then residents think that they're bylaws, but they're not. They're rules. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad you're there, not me. Okay.
I'll give you an update.
Thanks for that. All right. So, any last questions about bylaws?
No.
Okay, now we've got a complex one. It's a long one and it's a complex one. Residents requesting capital improvement to communal facilities. It's even more complicated than bylaws, and it's quite lengthy. Okay. So, for a start, what is capital improvement? Okay, I'll read it out what capital improvement is. There's a definition in the Retirement Villages Act. It means the first time provision of a capital item. And to the this is complicated, and to the extent it is not inconsistent with paragraph A, includes a thing that is a capital improvement under a ruling under the Taxation Administration Act dealing with capital improvement. So in some cases there's going to be some argy-bargy about certain types of work may fit into this taxation ruling be in or out, depending on whether it's going to be described as a capital improvement or not. But I wouldn't worry about that until the time comes. So in other words, in most cases, it's the first time provision of a capital item. Okay, a classic example of that would be, say you've got the communal kitchen and residents want a second oven. There's a classic, okay? You want a second oven, big fancy oven, a $20,000, say $12,000 oven. You with me on that? So it's a new item, the first time provision of a new item, not a replacement for the old oven. It's a second oven. You with me? Yes? You all happy? Yep. Give me a nod. Okay. So that's what a capital improvement is. The first time provision. And in some cases, a capital improvement might be work done to a certain thing that's in that description that we meant, or I should say the definition we talked about under the Taxation Administration Act. It could be an improvement. Okay. So what happens is residents for some reason want a second oven. Okay. That's the scenario. We'll work on that. Okay. In some cases, there's some parts of the Act that are relevant and it gives us some direction on what to do. But in many cases, the Act doesn't give us any direction or procedures whatsoever. So in those cases, what ARQRV is saying, or in particular me, because I'm the one that said it, they're really only suggestions. They're not really law. But you'll see the difference when we read the Act and when I talk about it, okay? So they're really only suggestions. The capital improvement provisions in the Retirement Village Act are in Division 3, which is Section 90 to Section 90E of the Act. That's where you go to find about stuff about capital improvement. Now, interesting enough, the first provision, it says the responsibility for capital improvement of retirement village. That's the first provision. It says a scheme operator is solely responsible for the cost of the retirement village's capital improvement, including the capital improvement of the retirement village's communal facilities owned by the operator. Okay? And it says this section applies subject to Section 90A and 90B. So immediately, that provision puts an onus or an obligation on the operator for all capital improvement. And then in the second subsection, it goes and gives an exemption. So those two exemptions are where a resident wants to do capital improvement to the unit. So that means they're responsible for the cost. And the other one is where residents are asking for it and residents are going to pay for it. So yes, it says that they're responsible or obliged for all the improvement with a B except. Does that make sense so far? You happy with that? So in other words, if a operator wants to do capital improvement themselves, they're responsible. But as soon as residents start asking, that's a different scenario. Okay?
So that would be, Ray, just from our residents' funds in this village, we bought a pizza oven.
Yeah, we're going to go down that path, Judy, further on. Yep, don't worry. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be covering all that down the track because that's more of the case. Yeah. Okay, so happy so far? No questions so far? Do you want me to explain what a capital item is? Is everyone happy with what is a capital item? Do you have a concept in your head what is a capital item, or do you want me to go through that too? Give me some feedback. Do you want me to talk about capital items? So capital improvement is the first time provision of a capital item. A capital item is all the building structures and all those sort of things, the plant, machinery, equipment used in the operations of the village, all those things, the village infrastructure, all those things, the amenities, the communal facilities, everything in those is all capital items. Okay, so, and that's why the oven in the communal kitchen comes into it. And Judy, yours is a sort of a different one again, but we'll cover that down the track. So those things are capital items, and that's what residents are asking for.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay, now, before we start, there's a big distinction between the words that they use in the Act of propose and request. So keep that in mind when I read out the particular provisions of the Act. Okay? Oh, before we start, just think about propose and request. You'll probably find, I don't know whether, has anybody gone through the process of requesting capital improvement in the village? Any villages? And let me know by hands up. Has anybody asked for it? Any residents have not asked for capital improvement? Not whatsoever. Okay. That's interesting. Normally people are asking for stuff left, right, and centre.
Sorry, Ray, down the bottom, Maureen from the Gold Coast, she had her hand up.
Maureen, can you open it? Can you turn on your...
Yep.
We've requested quite a few items in about the second year of our place, and management has agreed, and we have paid out of a fund we have with our social committee.
Okay, yep.
It's as simple as that.
That's good. So, Maureen, which village are you in, Maureen?
The Verge at Miami.
Oh, the Verge. Okay, so you've asked for stuff, and the residents actually ended up paying for it. Out of your slush fund. Okay, out of your social fund or whatever you call it. Okay, yep. One scenario. Okay, so invariably, residents in villages, when they want to have capital improvement done and the residents are asking for it, they usually, incorrectly, they go and start mucking around and passing a special resolution, because the Act actually says, it says this section applies if residents of a retirement village by special resolution at a residents meeting vote to give the scheme operator a written request for a capital improvement to the retirement village, and the scheme operator makes or agrees to make the capital improvement. What happens is everybody reads that and they think that that's the first step in the chain to go and propose capital improvement. That is definitely not the way to do it. You don't go and start passing special resolutions before you even know how much it's going to cost. Okay, so what happens is...
Excuse me, Ray, I'm interrupting because the 9th, the lady from the Middle Ridge, with your hand up.
Oh, hello?
Yes.
Oh.
We asked for something like it was shutters between a communal area and the kitchenette area, and we just asked for it, and they've got quotes and it's happening. As far as, well, we have no money, so they'll be paying for it.
Yeah. So say that again, you've asked for it.
Or anything, we just asked for it.
And what's happening?
Well, I've got quotes and it's going ahead when they can organise it.
Okay, that's good. Look, so have they agreed to pay for it?
Well, I'm assuming they have.
Yeah. That's the issue. That's the issue.
I'm sure they would have told us if we had to pay.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. We're going to cover this down the track. But if a scheme operator, if you guys put in a proposal and they just agree to it, good. That's all you want. That's the happy days. Okay.
Yeah. Denise is. Oh.
Yes. Yeah. We've just recently, with one of our new buildings, we had people wanting shutters. Initially, they were declined. They have been approved now, but level 1, 2, and 3, because they go above each other, they must all put the shutters in, those 3.
No. But that's not the community. That's not communal. That's not,
no.
That's
but
on the units.
They have to pay for them themselves. Yes.
That's on the units. Now, this is the communal facilities only, and we'll go back to that. We'll go back to the oven, or in your case, 9th Ridge, a screen or something, some shutters on the inside in the communal area, which is a good thing. Okay, so what you don't do is immediately residents are talking about it. There's a letter put to the committee, or it's raised at a residents meeting that someone wants some capital improvement for something, for example, the oven, for bigger events so you can cater. The first thing is you don't pass a special resolution. What you should do is actually start to put a proposal together, what you want, how much you can get an idea, and then propose it to the operator and let them take it from there. Okay. if they decide to pay for it, like Ninth Ridge, happy days. If they want residents to pay for it, that's another scenario. Okay, then other things have to happen. Okay, so the first thing is you do is you don't pass the special resolution. Why is that? Because you haven't got a clue how much it's going to cost. Haven't got a clue whether they're going to even agree to it. You haven't got a clue how it's going to be paid for. Haven't got a clue the time frames or things like that. So you don't pass a special resolution to start with. Okay. So if you make a proposal for capital improvement to the operator, it could come from various ways. As I said, it could come from a residents meeting. A person might be an individual, put in a letter to the committee, might even put a letter straight to the operator, and then it starts to get talked about as a proposal. There's no set way to do the proposal whatsoever. But if it goes to the committee though, a proposal for capital improvement from residents somehow, if the committee then gives it to the scheme operator must then get quotes for the capital improvement. They don't have an option. The act says they must get quotes. The thing to note is if they get quotes and they don't want to pay for it, that's when the special resolution procedures come into place then. Okay. So when the proposal is put forward, it's really only an idea at that stage, and you're only asking to explore the idea and to get quotes and things like that. A request is actually when all those things are being given to the residents, and they can then decide by special resolution. Then they can actually make a formal request to have the work done. But before that, if the scheme operator says after they get the quotes that they don't want to pay for it, which is quite reasonable in my view, if they don't want to pay for it, that's when it goes back to the residents to actually discuss it and to also decide if they're going to pay for it themselves or out of a residents fund, the social fund, like in the Verge, they paid for it out of their residents fund. So it sounds very complicated, but the main thing is you don't get the special resolution first. Okay.
So what you do is you just go straight to the scheme operator, say
through the committee or by a letter. Yeah.
The residents would like this done, and then the scheme operator has a look at it and says yes or no.
Yep. Well, no, they get quotes probably first.
They have to get quotes first.
If it comes from the committee, they must get quotes.
Okay. So they've got to get quotes, and then once they've got the quote, they can then decide. Well, if you want it, we're not going to pay for it.
Exactly. Yep.
If they say, okay, we've got the quotes, we're happy to pay for it. End of story. Nothing else.
Yep. Everything's fine. Everything's finished. Yep, that's done. Yep.
And if they come back to the residents and they say, no, we're not prepared to pay for it, but we think it's. Do they have to say, yeah, well, you can
in principle, they'd say we will agree to it, but you're going to have to pass a special resolution to say you're going to be responsible for the cost of it first.
Okay. So then you've got responsible for it, and then or for the cost of it, then you have to go to a special resolution.
Yes. Yeah.
And you may have to pay for it either as a separate or you haven't got into how it gets paid for you.
No. Okay. Now, if the operator gets the quotes and it says we're not going to pay for it, then it goes back to the residents. Then the residents have to decide just generally amongst themselves before they have any votes or anything, do they want to pay for it out of the residents fund, which is often if the village has got money. For example, in our village we got plenty of money, we spend money. The Verge had money. Ninth Ridge doesn't have any money, so they don't have any money to pay for it. Okay. So there's a discussion happens at a residents meeting, and they realise that they don't have any money to pay for it out of their residents fund, okay, out of their social fund, so to speak. And then if that's the case, that's when they have to craft a motion for a special resolution at that meeting to then put it to residents in 21 days' time to agree to pay for it, okay? Because once they agree to by special resolution to pay for it, every resident is responsible for the cost of that capital item. Okay. Say if it's $20,000 for the stove, everyone's got to cough up, and it's usually done by a special levy. And the operator puts that onto their fees, and they pay for it through their fees as a special levy. But having said that, though, all these discussions should take place with the operator and the residents before they craft their special resolution motion. Have it all nutted down on what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to be paid for. Okay, and then you'd talk to the operator and get an agreement in principle that they'd agree to all that if it's passed as a special resolution. Because once it's passed as a special resolution and they agree to do it, residents are responsible to pay for it. End of story. There's no way around it. It's by law you're responsible.
Right, I can see an argument.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought this through in the past,
Yeah,
but I can see an argument for people saying, so it's a special resolution, which is only 75% of those who vote. So I haven't voted, and now suddenly you're giving me an extra levy that I didn't vote on.
Okay, so that's why they've got to give them 21 days written notice to every resident that this vote's going to take place. If they want to have a vote on it, they've got to turn up and vote. And if they don't turn up and vote, that's their bad luck.
They'll have to pay. You pay regardless.
You pay regardless.
Okay.
And the Act actually says, I'll read it out to you, it says, if there's a special resolution passed, it says all residents of the retirement village, when the vote was taken, are jointly responsible for the cost of the capital improvement. There's no argument there. If it's passed by special resolution, then everyone's responsible. Now, the question arises is, how are they responsible? For example, it says residents, but you don't pay your fees by each resident, do you? You pay your fees by unit. Is that a fair comment?
Mm-hmm.
You only pay, you don't pay more because there's two people in the unit than when there's one person in the unit. Normally, I know some villages do, but that's unusual. So in my mind, if residents are responsible, the levy would be probably equal to the amount they pay in their fees each. The proportion would be the same as they pay in their fees each fortnight or each month. It'd just be by the unit. Does that make sense?
We've got a question.
Maureen from The Verge.
Yeah, Maureen from The Verge.
We vote by having a card for our unit, so the vote is only per unit, so there's no difference.
Say that again, sorry?
We vote by having a coloured card per unit handed out as you come in.
Yeah,
so the
that's
vote
what I
is
mean.
per unit, so there's no
That's how
difference.
you pay. Yeah, you pay one payment per unit, exactly.
That's right. So who's voting per person anywhere else?
No, it just all I'm saying is it says all residents in the Act. It doesn't specify how the payment's made. It says all residents.
Means the same as the other fees.
Yeah, so it says all residents. And how you pay is by unit. So your proportion would probably be the same. If you pay $50 and your neighbours pay $100 in their fees, they'd pay maybe more. I don't know. It doesn't specify. It's all up for grabs. But what's got to happen is have it all nutted out before the resolution, exactly what the scheme operator expects and what residents understand, and have it all agreed to between the operator and the residents before the motions put together and agreed to. Because not much use complaining after if the resolution was, wasn't done right. Does that make sense?
The other thing that's probably in that resolution, or probably is going to have to be open for discussion, is if that item breaks.
Oh, okay.
Residents,
Okay. No, I don't think that's needed, Judy, because the legislation says if this is a capital improvement, it's the first time provision of a capital item. And by definition, if the residents are paying for it themselves out of their pockets, not by the social fund, but they're paying it under the Act, under Section 90B, it is a capital item by definition. So it'll be covered by all those things as any other capital item in the village. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So most villages would pay for capital improvement via their social fund or their residence fund that they maintain, I would expect. For example, in our village, we just voted to have a new capital item put in. It was a pizza oven. Bit fancier here. It's actually on a conveyor belt, so it feeds pizzas through, so it can do quite a few pizzas. And what we did was our residents decided to use the money from our residence fund or the social fund, whatever you want to call it, to pay for that item. Obviously, you'd have to get prior approval from the operator to get that item. Residents buy it, and then the operator's got to decide whether they want to actually accept that as a capital item because it wasn't done under the provisions of the Act. Does that make sense? In those cases, there has to be discussions about, is the operator going to take that on as a capital item? In most cases, you'll probably find they'll say no. They'll probably say, you buy it, you residents are responsible for its maintenance and insurance. We've got quite a few items in our village where they're not capital items, but they're major items, but they're not defined as a capital item under the Act, and they're not maintained by the operator. We've got fridges in our bar, I think, Judy, aren't we? They're not capital items. Well, the residents own them. We've got a air compressor to pump up tyres for cars. It's not covered by as a capital item. So residents bought it, and the operator says, no, we're not going to accept that as a capital item. You guys buy it, you maintain it, you've got to replace it. But under the Act, if you go to a special resolution and residents pay for it out of their own pocket, that would definitely be a capital item, and the operator has to maintain it, replace it, and so on, and insure it. So there is a difference on how they're acquired. It's complicated, I know, but by the sound of it, not many villages have asked for capital improvement, which is interesting because I've got a few questions about that. But the first thing is, the main thing is, don't start passing special resolutions before you know what you're doing. That's not what you do. The wrong procedure. Okay, and that's what usually happens. But everyone prays that the operator is going to pay for it straight away. Okay, as a new capital item, they just buy it. Like Ninth Ridge, that's what you want. Hey, Ninth Ridge, get them pay for it. I know we've had numerous things done in our village. I think that the operator has seen it as a good thing and they've decided to pay for it. But it's usually when villages are developing. They're usually throwing more money at a village when they're developing rather than when they're fully developed. Once they're fully developed, the money usually dries up for capital improvement. But there is a big distinction between capital improvement and capital replacement. Okay, as we said earlier, there's a distinction. Okay. Well, just let me check my notes, make sure I've covered everything. So really, when a proposal is put forward, I'll just summarise that again. There's three scenarios. Once a proposal is put forward, the operator can say, yeah, that's a good idea and we'll pay for it. That's the end of it. That's good. The operator might get the quotes and say, we're not paying for it. You guys pay for it. And then you can pay for it by the special resolution, or you can pay for it by just out of the residence fund. Of note, if the residents are going to spend money from their residence fund, unless the constitution of the village says it's got to be a special resolution, it's only got to be a simple majority vote to spend the money from the fund. And I can see Maureen shaking her head there. Watch your head doesn't drop off, Maureen. So if it's just a simple residence fund expenditure and the operator agrees to it, it's just a simple majority vote. You only need a special resolution when residents as natural people or individuals are going to be responsible for the cost in their fees. And as I said, it's usually done by levy.
And what will happen as new people come into the village,
yep,
they won't have to contribute to that levy. That levy will only continue with the people who voted for that capital item.
At the time, yeah. Not even the people who voted. It was only the people in the village at the time, Judy. They might have voted no, and they still got to pay for it. If they're in the village when it was agreed to, they're responsible to pay for it. To clarify too, if there's two people in a unit and one leaves, one dies or goes in the care or whatever, that you're still responsible for the same amount than what you were before. Okay, they don't break it down by resident. They don't. If you've got 300 people in the village, they don't break it down 1/300. You pay each. You still got to pay the same amount than what you did before. Okay, and just of note, but it's not very common, that former residents, if they're in the village when the vote was taken by special resolution, they're also responsible for the levy when they leave until their fees stop. Okay, but that doesn't happen. So anyone that's looking at the budget and watching these things in the financial matters of the village, the former residents are responsible too, if they were there when the vote was taken.
But what you're saying there is that will only continue for up to 9 months.
Depending on your contract, yeah.
Depending on your contract or when the unit is sold. Yeah. But once the unit is sold, that's the end of it.
Yeah, it's the end of it then, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's many discussions that have to take place before it. Like the bigger the item, obviously the more discussions and more things need to be resolved before it's agreed to. You know, how it's going to be paid for. The exact cost, the nature and the timing of the capital improvement, the exact work. It's fair enough. If you're going to buy an oven, you want to nut out exactly what oven it's going to be. You don't just say you want an oven. They might give you the world's dodgiest oven. Yeah, and even if the scheme operator has agreed to do it and agreed to pay for it, there's nothing to prevent residents from being involved in discussions about the capital improvement to some degree, to influence the the operator on how it's going to go. For example, in the 9th Middle Ridge, where they're going to get those screens, there might be some sort of you say you want screens, but you might actually tell them we'd like some sort of louvers or something, and in grey or something, and you could give them that information. They don't have to take notice of it, but there's nothing to stop you from providing some sort of input into the job. You know what I mean? Yeah. How are we all going? Any questions?
I think it's a lot more complicated than we've always thought it was.
Well, it's not so. It's not complicated in practice. It's just complicated when you're trying to explain it, because of the different scenarios. What happens? There's only 3 scenarios really. The resident, the operator. Well, actually, there's 4. The operator might just say no, and that's the end of it. The operator might say, yeah, we'll do it and we'll pay for it. And the operator might say, no, we're not going to pay for it, but we'll let you do it. And then the residents just have to decide how they're going to pay for it, whether they're going to pay for it themselves or out of their fund. There's 4 scenarios, really, at the end of the day. Okay.
Don, Gordon, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. Look, just curiosity. Of all the people represented here, and I see there's 32, and I know that the terrace is represented twice, how many villages are freehold and how many are leasehold?
There's a register of villages on the government website, on the regulatory services website somewhere. It takes a while to find it. It's not, things aren't easily found, and it comes. You can get it off the website in an XML file, or no, hang on. Put that up.
I've seen that, Ray, but I'm just curious about the people gathered here.
Oh, here. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant overall.
No. I'm just curious about the people here.
Okay, hands up if you're from a freehold village.
Well, Pamela and I we're from the same village.
Put your hand down.
Okay, so one up. So we're the only 2, or the only one then?
No, there's also
there's about 3 or 4.
3 or 4 out of 30. Yeah, so 10%.
There are not many. Don, there are not many freehold villages. And you'll find that many operators who have got freehold villages are actually moving towards changing them to leasehold. So that is what's happening in the broader sector. I mean, there are some that are staying, but a lot are moving to a leasehold. So they're either buying them out when people move out, they're buying them and then reselling them as leasehold.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Judy.
The main reason for that, Don, is it's because it's just on the face of it, it sounds like it's a better way to own things, right, Don? You know, like you own the freehold. You know what I mean? You feel more comfortable owning the freehold. You have better, stronger tenure, you know, more robust tenure, and you feel more comfortable with what you own. But at the end of the day, you'll probably know that it's more complicated with the 2 acts and the various funds and the distinctions between the sinking funds and those sort of administration fund. Then you've got the retirement villages fund, and everybody's arguing about what goes in what and who's paying for what and all that sort of stuff. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, I understand. I'm the honorary treasurer now of the residents committee, and I'm on the body corporate as well. So,
and so you know the complexities of
I sure do.
village.
Yeah, so that's why I was just curious about the attendance here at the ARQRV meetings. That's all.
So ABO is a classic that's getting out of the freehold market.
Yeah, this is.
They're transitioning out of freehold.
Who's that?
ABO.
Oh, okay.
They think they're slowly transitioning the best they can. Is that a fair comment, Judy?
Yeah, yeah. And what and really ARQ doesn't get involved. We know very little about the Body Corporate Act. So I tend to say Ray's probably better, but
I won't comment. I won't go anywhere near it.
I'll just say we can't help. I'm sorry, we can't help you on Body Corporate. I don't know how they operate. Don't know how the Body Corporate works within a village. And I haven't yet found an operator, I have to say, even an operator, where I've asked for clarification. Could you tell me how, you know, your Body Corporate works besides the Retirement Villages Act? Many operators can't actually explain that to me either. So I'm not even sure that they understand.
And then you have a village where it's a mixture, leasehold and freeholds. That even complicates matters.
Oh, I couldn't imagine that. So.
No, there are those.
There's those. Okay, so there's no more questions, is there?
You can't see. Laurie, can you see anything?
Not that I can see. Oh, no, I think that was just a hand in front of the camera.
If you've got a question, just speak up. Just unmute yourself and no, there is somebody. Middle Ridge again is asked. Oh no, they've taken their hand down.
Sorry, I did want to ask. My hand disappeared.
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with capital improvements. I just wanted to ask a question about committee voting.
Who's talking? Who's?
Middle Ridge.
Middle Ridge.
No, I can see a gentleman there, but I can't see the other person. So there was,
sorry.
He was miming. When you say the voting, the committee voting.
When we're voting in the committee.
Yep.
Our constitution says 5 to 7 members.
Yep.
If only 7 people nominate, can we just take that number to a meeting and get a show of hands? Are they happy for those 7 to be?
If your constitution says that?
Yeah.
The Act actually says when you're talking about the election, right? And to actually have that procedure in place, I think you just about got to have it in your constitution, so that's a good thing. Hang on, let me just have a look. It says, hang on, section 127.
I think it is.
Section 127, it says the residents of a retirement village may establish by election, operative word election, conducted among themselves a residents committee. So in my mind, the word election means that residents should have some sort of say in who's going to be on the committee. They should be ratified at some stage and to some degree somehow. And what you're saying is if they're ratified just by a show of hands, that's an election in my mind. I don't think in a retirement village, Judy disagrees, that people can just say, I'm on the committee because there was no other nominations. You know, like you have 7 nominations. I don't think they should be declared
no,
it would go without being ratified by
the residents.
I think in my mind, that's my view. Judy and I have disagreements about that. But I think they should be at least agreed to by residents. For example, there's a lot of people that residents don't want on their committee. I know, and then Judy used the argument, but then you don't have a committee. Well, that might be a better thing in some cases than having people that are toxic on a committee, where there might be no votes for them. No one would vote for them. They get one vote. That's their own vote. And why would they be allowed on a committee if no one voted for them? You know what I mean? So that's just my view. Judy's got to speak, Judy. I can see you busting to say something.
No, I just think we have to be very careful. And look, I'm on our Constitution Working Party on our village at the moment, and this has been an ongoing discussion. How do you actually, if the committee says you can have 7, a minimum of 7 and only 7, do you just declare all of them on? Or do you vote for each one? Do you still have an election? Do you just do it by a show of hands? But I'd be very uncomfortable if I was sitting in a meeting and, I was a show of hands for every single person. You're going to vote for Judy, anybody against it? You're going to vote for Ray, anybody against it? That would be, I don't know that anybody would vote against you anyway in that sort of public space. So I think it's a difficult thing.
There should be some sort of ratification of who's on the committee in my mind.
So you would ratify every single person, Ray?
I would, because if that's
actually
the way
we do that at the ARQ AGM, because we never get enough people for our committee, and they will say Judy is nominated for president,
unopposed.
Unopposed, but we still, all those in favour. I mean, I'd feel horrible if not one person put up their hand.
Well, we don't want you. If that's the case, we don't want you.
And then I go, oh well. But so we do say, and Ray is both, so Ray's nominated for the committee. All those in favour. So that's how we do it at the ARQ committee. At the AGM. At the AGM.
A residents committee, in my mind, is much more personal voting than for another organisation. In a retirement village, we have to deal personally with our committee. Is that a fair comment? Much more than in other groups. And that way, there's a lot of personal politics, I suppose is the word, that comes into play in a retirement village. And people are very strongly opposed to certain people, or want them on their committee or not want them on the committee. So it's a good thing to have some sort of ratification. Personally, as Judy said, I don't think show of hands is a good way to do it, but there needs to be some sort of ratification if that's the case. Probably a secret ballot at the meeting, I don't know.
It's difficult how you deal with that, because there are always going to be personalities in a village that nobody likes.
Because and that other thing too is, if you get people in your committee that's toxic, it can destroy the whole community. So residents are very mindful of who's on their committee, and you can all probably what's the word? You all probably think you're the world's best committee people at the moment, but you don't know what the residents think about you. And vice versa, when other people get on the committee, you'll probably think they're not doing a very good job, and you don't want them on the committee. So you want to be able to at least decide, have your say on who's going to be on the committee, not just the fact that they nominated. There's all sorts of arguments about this. Ninth Ridge, can't remember your name. There's all sorts of arguments. So, but whatever it's going to be, I suggest you put it in your constitution.
Yeah, put it in your constitution, and so that everybody follows the same. The same process is followed every year, whichever way you go. I think that's more important, that it's actually written down somewhere, and that's the voting process that you actually follow.
Okay, you all happy with that then?
All right. Well,
there's no answer.
Okay, so this will be the last of this current series, which were four sessions that Ray did, because that were the most questions that we get asked for when people contact us, when committees contact us about issues. So we chose the four most common topics. As I said, I'm hoping to do the leaving a village one fairly soon. And the department one is I think is very important. You would have seen your budgets are starting to come in. So I've had some questions about budgets. Look, I know our treasurer's dealt with some budgets that he's seen. I haven't seen any of the new budgets yet, but I really would like some clarification from the department. We know more than the rest of you. We just have some people with some more expertise on the committee who know how to deal with the issue for the budgets at the moment. But it would still be good to get the committee, the department involved with that. And then just let us know if there's anything else that you think you'd like us to run webinars on. I'm really happy to do that going forward. And I think that we'll make webinars a part of a normal part of the offerings that we have for members. So sometimes they'll be open to all members, not necessarily just the committee. So these were particularly aimed at the committee, these sets of webinars. So, Ray, do you have anything else?
No, thank you for coming.
Laurie, do you have anything else before we close?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So nobody else has any questions? I'll close the meeting and it's 11:15. Thank you all very much. Thank you.